Hey creatives, and welcome to another video. I'm still working on the intro. I don't know if I want to call you guys creatives or what. If you guys have any suggestions, let me know in the comments below. Way back in July, when I'm actually filming this, by the way, I released half of the interview with Timothy McKean, the narrator of Hunter. He is a super professional narrator. I actually had a chance to sit down and interview him, and part of the interview we got off on a little tangent about Christian fiction, writing it, reading it, what's it like, what works about it, what doesn't work about it. It was a very in-depth, very really good conversation, a really deep conversation about Christian fiction that I feel needed to happen, needed to be said. And so this is that portion, the second and final part to the interview with Timothy. So what's your favorite genre to narrate?
I like the mystery genre. I like sci-fi a lot, fantasy. For some reason, I keep getting cast in horror. I don't enjoy horror at all. It's not fun to read. I don't enjoy horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's something about my voice that lends itself well to that. So I keep getting cast that way. But so that would be my least. But yeah, the mystery and the sci-fi genres are my favorites, both
Really
as a
cool.
reader and as a narrator.
Right. Which the reader brings me up to, like, obviously you mentioned before that you like to read and stuff. So I was going to ask you if you read in your free time. And then if you enjoy reading or if it's like all work to you, and then what genre you like to read. So.
Mm-hmm. Same mystery. I grew up reading a lot of Tom Clancy. Well, before that, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and kind of going back to your comment about sharing your faith and the power of stories. There's some ways that stories can share faith more clearly than even the Bible, or very strict, very what's the better word, traditional or liturgical type texts.
Yeah.
Because we can connect to them, right? You understand God's love and Christ's sacrifice through the characters like Aslan much better than just what you hear at church, or those the actual stories of those people, right? And so that's one of those things. So I grew up with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and a lot of those fantasy and allegory type genres. And then as I got older and started getting more into the worldly, gritty kind of world, where you get into Tom Clancy and John Grisham and all those kind of things. So right now I just finished. What's the one I just finished? Oh, I'm Car. What's I'm embarrassed that I'm forgetting his name. But the author that does the Terminal List series.
Oh, okay.
Is it? His last name is Carr. Can't think of the first name. So I've been reading that series, and I like to also, like I said earlier, listen to audiobooks. Been listening to that one, and I like to listen to different narrators. And as I've gotten more into audiobooks as a profession, it does become a little bit like a professional development thing. Sometimes I'll buy a book and get the audiobook so I can kind of read along and hear, oh, well, how is that narrator interpreting this line, or what are they bringing to it? So it's always interesting to hear that too.
Yeah, I like what you said about, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. I grew up with the same, and so that's why I write that kind of stuff, because that's a huge inspiration for me. And I feel like sometimes, no offense, like anybody who writes Christian fiction, because it's obviously a good thing, but in my experience, a lot of Christian fiction has been very predictable, very clear, and like not, I don't know, I just find it kind of boring and dull. And I hate saying that because I appreciate everybody who obviously writes Christian fiction, but for me, I like realistic stuff. I like gritty stuff. And so for me, mixing the grit with the faith stuff, I feel like a lot of people can hopefully relate to it a lot better than something that's a little too preachy or too, predictable and too technical, I guess.
Too Hallmark Channel, right?
Yeah, Hallmark. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And that's one of the things I liked about when I auditioned for, actually I didn't audition for Hunter. What did I audition for?
I think you auditioned for Hunter.
Different one. But that was one of the things that I liked when I first was reading your stuff, is that it's got that deeper level to it, right? It's got that allegorical level to it. you kind of reminded me, I had a choir director at one point that said, Christianity is no excuse for mediocrity. It's like,
That's a good quote.
just because it's church music, just because we're at church, or just because in your case, just because you're writing Christian fiction, doesn't give an excuse to not be good, right? It still has to be the same level of writing as if it were a secular novel, right?
Yeah.
That the Christianity is no excuse for mediocrity, and that's always stuck with me. Of whether it's music performance at church, or whether it's writing like this, or even performing works like this, of it has that deeper level. It has to step up the performance, right? It has to be otherwise it gets overshadowed, right? And especially if
So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. Let's get into this.
If your intention is writing something like that is to speak to a non-Christian audience, then the Christian message can't hit them over the head, right? It can't be, and it can't be so blatant and like you said, preachy, that you can't connect to the text, that you can't connect to the story and the characters, right? In this kind of work, in literature, the character always has to be relatable and connectable, and then the message comes with that, and the message is grounded in how relatable and how real that character is.
I feel like, yeah, the original version of one scene in Hunter, where they're all talking about their faith and their beliefs and stuff, and one of the side characters, disagrees, and Avarella stands up and gives this little speech. Like, the original speech I had was actually a lot more preachy, and when I edited it, I've edited it with other people before, and so that was one of the things that I did tone down with this latest version of it, and I changed it to where she was more sympathetic, and she was more like, I understand where you're coming from, but here's some encouragement, and kind of less preachy about the whole situation and stuff like that. Because I feel like sometimes Christian fiction, especially with Christian media, like not recently with like The Chosen and all these other Christian stuff coming out, but Christian fiction in general used to be very out of touch with reality. And I feel like it's hard for people to get into it if it's not realistic. And so I'm very like, that's where a lot of my realism and grit comes from, is because I want to be more in touch with reality, but still delivering the same message. So that's really good.
Yeah. And it can't be, a lot of Christian fiction, I feel like, is only intended for a Christian audience, which I think defeats the purpose. Like, yeah, you're just
preaching to the choir at that point.
To the people that already believe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good for them to have good, clean literature for them to enjoy. If they don't, like reading things that have, more worldly mess in it. But if the intention of your literature is to bring that message, they've already got that message, right? So, so I like your approach there. Yeah, yeah. I know the scene you're thinking of there, and I had that same response of, okay, I can't over preach this, right? It has to be sincere. It has to be grounded in her care for the others, right? Her desire that the others have a better life, but also that she's starting to understand, because this is a path of realization for her too, right? She's as she was young and at home in her small village, there was a certain, she only came into contact with certain people and certain types of people. And so she's, having that kind of going out into the world and discovering that lots of things are different than they were at home, like we all do. Yeah. So she's having that experience, but she's also wanting to take care of them. She's got that instinct of, I want to help these people because they helped me. And it's interesting. She starts, and I don't think this is too much of a spoiler. You can edit it if it is. Yeah. She starts off really motivated by revenge, right? She goes to Zagara because she wants to avenge Gabriel, or not avenge him, but find him, rescue him. And then slowly over time, she realizes that she's not so sure that she can do that. But that there's a value, there's purpose that she can bring there to the others by helping and making their lives better and easier, or whatever. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting too, of that it has to come from that place of care and her intention to help. Yeah, I agree. And she doesn't have to convince them. She just has to plant the seeds. And I think that's what a lot of, we're kind of branching off here, but I think that's maybe something that a lot of like Christians in their own evangelism miss, is that you don't have to like convince people and hit them over the head. You just plant the seeds. And we can see that in these characters of, especially in Jared, of, wait a minute, she had this thought, or she he's picking up on what her motivation was, of what she thought about him instead of herself. Is that a thing that people do?
Yeah.
All you have to do is plant the seeds, and the change will happen within the other person naturally, because they'll respond to it if they need that.
Yeah, I feel like it reflects my journey too, because I used to be one of those, like, hit people over the head when I was a teenager. Like, I would get in fights with people all the time, and like I thought I was being like an apologetics, or like, and when I'm getting older, I'm like, that's not how that works, and that's not gonna win any hearts here. So it's like I had to learn that after making some mistakes, and you just kind of, I've like learned. And I feel like Hunter, when I first wrote it, was a reflection of myself at the time. And so over the times, the different versions of it, this recent version reflects my growth, and how I've changed, and how I realized that you can't just beat people over the head. And like, especially for me, wanting to reach not just a Christian audience and give them clean stuff to read, but a secular one, you can't beat people over the head, and that's not going to work, especially in today's society. It ain't going to work. So you have to come with a different kind of approach to it. And I feel like I've grown, because I didn't used to be that way. I would get in fights with people all the time about my faith, and I thought I was doing something great. It's like, no, you're just making things worse. Stop it. So
I think that's probably a great observation, and probably true of most of the people that make mistakes, right? Whether you are, regardless of what side of things you fall on, politics or socially, the people on the other side from you probably have good intentions. Like, they're doing it because they have a reason, and they're trying to either protect something or help something. And that's one of the things that we all make mistakes, and that's how we learn. But it's so funny how often those mistakes came from a good place, just poorly executed. Or,
yeah.
It just didn't work. It didn't work the way we thought.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching that interview with Timothy. Like I said, we got off on a tangent, but it was a really deep, really needed conversation about Christian fiction and why I write the way that I do, and what we love about Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Narnia and all that stuff, and like Christian fiction in general, and like where it can be improved and stuff. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, more writing sprint videos every Wednesday, and then writing react videos every Friday. And in the meantime, check out this interview with Timothy. This was the first part of the interview where we actually talked about him, his life, how he got into narrating, what the process of narrating Hunter was, and some of his favorite characters, and to narrate his most difficult characters, all the good stuff. So check it out. You don't want to miss it.